for our listeners that might not know, what is a franchise? Describe what that is.
Sure. So basically, you and I get together and we start a business. And we have one location and we control all of the quality, because you and I are the only employees that, we own the company, and then maybe we get bigger, we need more people, but we control the quality. But we have this product and we realize we only have so many hours in the day that we can work. It's so big, we can only get so big because of funding, because of quality control. That's always the big thing. And so what a lot of companies do is they franchise. So they say, we will sell people the rights to run our business, their own little office, right? Their own little restaurant or whatever it turns out to be. But they have to pay us royalties. They have to pay us many things, and including a franchise fee. And that's how you and I would become wealthy, by allowing other people to take our concept and open up their little shop, hopefully nation or worldwide, which is what happened with Jack in the Box, and also what happened with obviously with McDonald's. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest well-known franchises. I believe the Golden Arches is either the number 1 or number 2 most recognized logo in the world.
Yeah.
I think Coke is either, I forget, but the Golden Arches, because of basically Ray Kroc and what he did to expand, McDonald's brothers, they just had their one place in San Bernardino, I believe it is. And if you watch The Founder, you know how that story started with Ray Kroc with the shake machines, and which is pretty interesting. And McDonald's, is a huge company today. And so they franchise and allow others to open up their own McDonald's, open up their own Jack in the Boxes, Wendy's, Burger King, you name it. And the franchisor, of course, is concerned about quality control. They want to make sure that burger or whatever product is exactly like every other one. And so they make sure that that's the case, or do the best they can. And then that's the idea behind franchising.
Yeah. So you pay the initial startup fee, the franchise fee, right? And then you pay royalties every month for having the Jack in the Box name.
Correct.
So they collect a little bit of that, and you get the benefit of the history and the consistency of the food and like that, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So we have daily deliveries of food, right, which is all set up by corporate with different areas that take care of it. They do all the pricing for us and everything. Advertising, right? You watch the Jack on TV do his commercials. That's all done by corporate. We pay fees for them to do that. They pay for the radio time and the TV time and all that, but it all comes from funds that we have put up through our marketing fees that we pay.
And now you don't have to worry about advertising.
Correct. We have a national brand advertising across the country, and we don't have to worry about doing all that.
Yeah. Now you said at one point you had 4 total partners, right? You and 3 other guys, and at one point you had like 34 restaurants.
Yeah, we started. So in 2016, we had 14. There were 4 of us partners. We had 14 restaurants, and we had some debt. And we decided to expand, and corporate was offering some restaurants to their franchisees. So between a restaurant that we opened and the ones that we bought, we got up to 34 restaurants. The problem with that is that we also took on a lot of debt. And I know interest rates were low at the time, but I just don't like that risk of something going bad and having high debt.
Yeah.
Just to give you an idea, my portion of the debt, I was a 25% owner in the company. My portion of the debt was $75,000 a month.
Wow.
Okay. That's a major nut to crack. Yeah. So, I went from $4.25 an hour to $75,000 a month. There's some big swings. So yeah, $75,000 a month. And then if we fast forward to today, we sold off all but 8 of the 34 restaurants. We took the proceeds We paid out two partners over the last couple of years, and we retired all of our debt. So now we are debt free. We have 8 restaurants, and we're on target to open 6 more without any debt over the next 2 years.
Nice.
So it'll actually be end of 23, maybe early 24, that we will have 6 more restaurants debt free on the books. Maybe more. We're looking to expand a little.
Now, what I learned a little bit from Ray Kroc in that he, what was his famous line? I think I mentioned it to you that they weren't, McDonald's isn't in the hamburger business, it's in the real estate business, right? And now, as a franchisee of Jack in the Box,
Yeah.
do you own the land under it, or how does that work?
Well, so when we bought in 2016, we bought into the restaurants. We didn't buy into any of the land.
Okay.
So you've got, the way I see it is you've got 3 possibilities. If the franchisee, like on the ones that we're building, we bought the land and we'll own the land, and then we'll build a building, and then we'll rent it to ourselves, basically. So you have franchisees who own land. You have corporate that owns land, or you have some third party out there. You, for instance, might buy some land, and I may come to you down the road and say, hey, I'd love to build a Jack on your property, and we work out a deal that allows me to build it and you to collect rent.
Yeah.
Sometimes that goes through corporate, sometimes it doesn't. So it just depends on the situation. But as Ray Kroc did when he was basically told, again, according to the movie, if you own the real estate, you control everything on the outside, as opposed to, as a franchisee, you only control what's on the inside of the restaurant. And if you don't like the way that they're handling things, if you do the right rental agreement, you can boot the restaurant out and still own the land.
Yeah.
Their margins were pretty low, and their prices, burgers were what, 20 cents or 15 cents or whatever it was back then.
Yeah, 19 cents.
So they're working on, and so they were working on very low margins and very low pricing. But the real estate is what really turned. I don't want to say McDonald's, because that was a separate company, but the McDonald's burger franchise was a separate company than the real estate company, as I understand it, of which the brothers didn't have any ownership in, only Ray Kroc did. So it's kind of an interesting situation, but whatever. Today, I understand McDonald's is one of the largest real estate owners in the country. And when they went to refranchise, so what I mean by that is, let's say that there's 2,000 McDonald's, whatever, in this area, or nationwide, whatever it was. And they're all owned by corporate. And they say, hey, we want to get the franchisees out there. We want to expand and let them run more. We cut down on our employee base and have all the benefits of just being a machine that collects money without much risk. We're going to refranchise. We're going to go to some of those franchisees and say, hey, I see you're in San Diego with 3 McDonald's. Would you like to have 6 more? And for you up in San Francisco, you've got 4, how about 7 more? And they just went around the country and they sold their rights to run those restaurants to franchisees. So now they're collecting marketing, they're collecting a fee for the sale, they're collecting rent, because they never sold anything, including real estate. They only sold the restaurant. So that's what Ray Kroc basically did. He built McDonald's into a real estate company by keeping the real estate and collecting all that rent. Incredible cash flow. And if you think about it, if all you owned was the real estate and you were collecting marketing fees, you're collecting franchise fees, you're collecting royalties, do you care about minimum wage? No. Do you care about employees or customers walking in, slipping and falling, or being harassed and suing you? No. Do you care about property taxes going up? No, because you have triple net leases and it's all paid for by the franchisees. So you cut your overhead, you have land and building, and that's what you have for income forever, and you reduce risk, as I see it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great formula. And in fact, after watching the movie, I didn't see it when it first came out, but I watched it 4 years ago, maybe. And thinking, gosh, that's a great business model. So that's when we started buying up land and building restaurants and having ownership in the land. On a very
pretty cool.
much smaller scale, doing what he did. Yeah.
That is pretty cool. Now I mentioned during our poker game maybe a week ago, I said, what is it about? I was looking at buying McDonald's stock. This was maybe a decade ago. Oh, it was during the financial crisis of 07, 08. And I was asking my CPA, I said, hey, I've noticed the whole country seems to be in a depression, but McDonald's has people lined up out the door. Like,
Yeah.
it would make sense to me to buy stock in that. And he couldn't really articulate why McDonald's is successful when times are bad and also when times are good. Can you run through that?
Sure. I think it's the same for almost all fast foods,
Yeah.
not all, and I'll explain the difference. You have in good times, people have money, they're on a rush, they got a meeting, they're traveling, they just want to get in and out of their car or stop and go to the restroom or something, and they'll grab something to eat. You're always going to have that, whether it's good times, bad times, right? You're also going to have those that, let's just say, ate at higher level restaurants, and as times get bad, they drop down to a lower level of food, just because they don't have the money to go spend, $50 for a steak. They want to do something different, and everybody trickles down to a lower type of restaurant. And not to say fast food is at the bottom, but it's certainly, I would say, not at the top, as far as you're not going to get a 60-day aged grass-fed beef burger at a McDonald's, right? That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So as far as inflation, good times, bad times, I believe there's always going to be a market for people. They got to eat. And with today's pressure to do well business-wise, even if you're working out of your home, as opposed to whatever, you only have a certain amount of time to eat. And if you're on a schedule, you got to get it done. So these days, people, they have food delivered, Uber and whoever else does the food deliveries. They do that, or they take 15 minutes and they leave their home or leave their office. They get to a place, they want a meal, and they go to a fast food place. So I think there's always going to be a demand for that. Where there isn't going to be a demand is when you don't have a drive-through and you don't have the convenience of drive-through. So that, if you look at, because I have basically a rule that says if I am, like for instance, I would never own Jack in the Box stock, because I have enough invested in Jack in the Box franchise that I would never buy stock in it, because if it does great, I do great owning the franchise. Yeah. If it does terrible, I lose on the franchise side and my investments. Yeah. I don't want to have a double loss. Yeah. So would I buy McDonald's? Right now, I've been out of the stock market for the last 5-6 years now. I haven't followed it at all, even though it was part of my business model before I left it. I've been out for certain reasons, mainly because I was focusing on the building up the Jack in the Box restaurants and the partnerships that we had. So, and I haven't gone back, and I really have no plans of jumping back in the market. But I will tell you that in 2019, was it March, when everything started to falter because of COVID, you start looking at some of the pricing of the oil companies. Nobody's driving. You look at some of the fast foods, nobody was going out. The stocks were hammered. Jack went from like 100 down to, was it in teens maybe? McDonald's got hurt, Wendy's hurt, they all got crushed. Yet they were some of the quickest to come back and actually hit new highs. And lost opportunity, perhaps, but again, because we had a drive-through, we had record sales in 19 and 20. We had a definite loss in our sales in the beginning, in March, April, May, but then we came back and we had an incredible 2020. And 19, and we're actually holding on to volumes this year, even though other restaurants have opened. And so the drive-through is what saved all the fast foods that have drive-throughs. if you, not that I'll use Denny's as an example, I wouldn't consider it fast food, but it's a dine-in. They were crushed.
Yeah.
Absolutely crushed. I have people that I know that own Jack's and own Denny's. Their Denny's are down 80% in sales. How would you like to have a long-term lease on a building that you don't own, have debt through the bank, have 80% of your sales go down? You can't survive.
Yeah.
And so they were using other resources to help survive. And then thankfully, the rules allowed them to open up their dining room and they got some of their business back, but they're not anywhere close to where they were. For those that are familiar with Soup Plantation, they're gone. They're not coming back. Yeah. Other companies that have buffets type, they're gone. Restaurants gone, sports bars gone, some of them. It was tough. And it's kind of embarrassing, but to say that, oh yeah, we had record sales when everyone else was suffering. So it's the drive-through, it's convenience. And that's why I think that industry is going to do well, as long as it has the option of driving through. By the way, the 6 that we're opening are going to be drive-through only. So we're not going to have an inside dining area.
You learned your lesson with that one, right? I remember I came across that same thing. There was a McDonald's at one, and then I don't remember what the other restaurant was, but it didn't have a drive-through. So that made my decision for me, because otherwise I had to sit in the parking lot and download some app so I could get my food. I'm like, well, I'm on my way to Big Bear. I'm not going to do that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all about convenience, and that's why people go to fast food, because it's supposed to be fast, and actually it's decent food. I'm not telling you should eat any fast food 3 times a day, 7 days a week, but it's not as bad as, some of it is not as bad as people think. I mean, there's a lot of calories, a lot of everything in the food, but it's decent tasting, fresh. We make everything to order. We don't stack our foods up, so you don't get a cold taco, you get a hot one. So yeah, that's what my other partner does. He operates the restaurants, and he's very strict on good quality, good customer service, which I believe is why we have some of the highest volume restaurants in the whole Jack system.
What's your, being an entrepreneur and a businessman, and I guess an actuary as well, like what's your outlook on the global economy for the coming year? We're wrapping up 2021. What do you see coming in the next cycle?
Well, for next year, I think we're going to see still high commodity pricing. I think the economy is going to keep slowing. There's not enough stuff available, whether it's at the docks and it can't be shipped, or it just isn't being produced. So the supply is down, demand is up, higher pricing. Higher pricing leads to inflation. Inflation, of course, should lead to higher interest rates. And the fallout of higher interest rates is a lower housing market. So you can't, if interest rates are 2%, you can afford to buy a $1 million home. If interest rates are 8%, you can only afford to buy a $400,000 house, whatever the number is. Yeah. So because it's the same monthly payment. So you have to watch the effect of interest rates on housing. And that's actually what I think is going to start to slow down as the government realizes inflation is getting a little out of hand. They're going to have to raise rates. And with that, mortgage rates will go up, housing prices will come down. And that's what I think is going to happen over the next year or two. But I still think that it's the commodity pricing and just the lack of a supply chain of products that we just don't have. I mean, example is how it affected me. I needed to get 100 linear feet of chain link fence put around a part of my house. We have deer, and I was planting a bunch of fruit trees. I didn't want to plant them all and have them come eat them. And so I put this 100 linear foot chain link fence. That would have cost me about maybe $3,500 a year or so ago. Okay. I call my guy who used to be one of my clients, so I know he's not ripping me off. That same chain link fence was $7,500, and he couldn't get all the poles. He just couldn't. The suppliers didn't have them. So it took like 3 weeks to get all the poles, the chain link, and everything else. But $7,500 to get this done. And normally I would have just waited, but I got the trees and I want to plant them and I don't want them to get eaten. So I had to spend the money, and I think that's just what's happening. That inflation. I mean, look at gas prices.
Yeah.
$5 a gallon is like unheard of, and I think my partner up in Central California is paying like $5.50 a gallon. So it's insane what's happening with these prices, and there's only so much money going around, so people are going to have to suffer through it. It's going to be tough. So I'm not optimistic that our economy is going to do fantastic. There will always be sectors of the economy that do well.
Yeah. And
even in great times, there's going to be sectors that do poorly. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Right. I always use the example of the buggy whip company. Back then, people were selling buggy whips because they had horse-drawn carriages.
Yeah.
You just don't see too many of those today, right?
Yeah.
So in good times, that buggy whip company was doing great. Today, you can't find them.
Right? Oh, they had to switch to the fuzzy dice company for the rearview mirror instead.
Which, by the way, I have on my car, fuzzy dice. So it's I understand that. So yeah, it's you have to change with the times. And so anyway, that's kind of my look on the short-term global economy. My long-term, very long-term, maybe 20, 30, 40 years, is really, I think we have a problem. And talk to a lot of people about it. I know it's kind of controversial, but I just personally believe there's too many people on the planet. We have limited resources. How do we feed them all? How do we house them all? Water, we can go days without food. We can't go days without water. And I think water is going to become a major, something that you want to control. Countries are going to want to control water. Wars could be fought over water. Cloud seeding, to take the water and dump it on your land and not let it go, as an example, south of Mexico or whatever. Yeah. That's going to be major. I'm not saying we limit people's life expectancies. I'm just saying there's too many people, not like Soylent Green, right? Where the old movie where you hit a certain age and you got in that long line of they end your life. Yeah. I think there's just too many people, and some of the TV shows I watch, they talk about people's desire for beef is causing a lot of problems in the world. We have to level forests to put not just the cattle on, but to also put the food, grow the food for the cattle to eat. And it's just a bad circle. More demand for beef, more land for cows, more land for the food that they eat. And their solution is to, say, use plant-based proteins or whatever to replace beef. And I just have a problem with that. That's not really solving the demand. It's just shifting the demand to something else. Yeah. So where people have said, there's billions and billions of grasshoppers and other insects that are very high in protein. We could just capture those or raise those and cook them up. And I'm thinking, well, great. So we go to 15 billion people on the earth and we're all eating insects. Well, that's going to take a toll on the rest of the balance of nature. And I see it as a demand problem, but not one of beef. I believe it's just a demand in general of too many people. And like I said, we've had major discussions with friends and they get awfully heated when we talk about limiting number of children or something. Yeah. I get that, but I just say, it's not going to be my problem. I don't think it's going to happen during my lifetime, but I think there's just going to be a major problem with resources and how we handle that. So my long-term forecast is if we don't do something with our population, that we're going to run into some resources problems.
I have a couple of bets in on water rights companies for that exact reason. They pay a little dividend, and I hope I'm wrong. But if I'm not, I think
Yeah.
they could be doing quite well a couple decades from now.
Well,
You know,
I was watching a show the other. I was watching a show the other day on. It was a little town, and some big company, water company, came in and they sunk wells, and they drew all the water out. It took them 5-10 years, whatever it was, and they go, okay, we're done here. Go to the next town, and they bottled water. That's what they did. So when you go to the store and you have a bottle of water that came from this company, it may have come from this town, right? So when the water runs dry, they just pick up and leave. And what happens to the town? They got no water, and they don't survive. The town literally just goes under.
Yeah.
And so I have a problem with the demand. As an actuary, you look at risks, and populations and mortality and all that stuff. I just see this as a potentially major problem down the road. And I just hate to think, oh, we can desalinate the oceans. Well, then what?
Yeah.
You run out of water in the ocean? I mean, I don't know. I've talked to people about, I gave them the example of Einstein's formula of E equals MC squared. There's so much energy. It's just spread out between, different forms, et cetera. And they're saying to me, well, there's so much water on the earth and it stays constant. Whatever you plant your tree, some of that evaporates, goes in the atmosphere, becomes clouds, it rains. So that water is recycled. We're not tearing it apart and turning it into something else. We're using it for wastewater. We're using it to consume as drinking water, watering plants, doing whatever. But it stays in the earth. And I say, well, that may be true, but it's not going in the place where it is needed. So like water that evaporates, turns into clouds, maybe dumping the water in the ocean. It's not going to Phoenix.
Yeah. Yeah.
Phoenix
And
is gonna need
generally
water.
speaking, that water is becoming more and more contaminated and dirty over time.
Correct. And so I just, that's to me is a major long-term issue as to what's happening there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my short, long-term version of the global.
Okay. What can you leave our listeners with as a tip, a golden nugget, a piece of advice that they can take home and use in their own life?
Sure. I think as far as tips go, it happened to me. And I would say as long as you don't be afraid of failing. If you try something new, don't be afraid of failing. When I had the choice to go work for somebody, move to Orange County or start my own company, I didn't really have the backup, I'll say, to start my own company. I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't, like I said, my wife didn't work. I had a non-compete clause, so it was kind of stacked against me. So I have that fear of failing. But I'm thinking, well, my other option is to move to Orange County or take another job. I didn't really want those, so I fought hard to make my own business work. And so I say, as long as you can learn, don't be afraid to fail. And in fact, we can point to good old Colonel Harlan Sanders, Kentucky Fried Chicken. As I understand it, he put this recipe together, and the rumor is 1,009 attempts he made to have someone accept his recipe before they finally accepted it. And they didn't accept it until he was 65 years old. He had also been in and out of jobs and had troubles just keeping a job, but he just kept pushing until it finally happened. I understand that he was traveling around the country in his car, signing up franchisees, and his stake was his Social Security check. That's how he made it, which was like $100 and something back then. So I say, if you learn from failures, don't be afraid to fail. I think it's okay. The other thing I would say is what I ended up doing, which is keep your eyes, your ears open, listen to those little conversations that happen around you. You never know what little tidbit, it just may take one or two of those little comments, as it did for me, that kind of turned me into an eagle that got to park on level 1, where I was a turkey parking on level 3 for a while. I think just it doesn't cost anything to listen and talk to people that have done well, learn their story and see if you can apply it. That's what I would tell them.
Thank you. That's what I'm trying to do with this show. Good deal. Well,
You
thank
go.
you very much, Mike. This was a lot of fun, and I think we'll probably end up splitting this into 2 episodes. And thank you for coming on. Did you have any plug or anything you wanted to throw in?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm good.
All right. Good deal.
All right. Thank you.
Alrighty, man. Well, thank you,
See you.
and thank you for tuning in. We will talk to you next time.